Sunshines, welcome to my YouTube channel. Welcome to Set Apart Diaries. If you're new here, please subscribe to my channel so you can be up to date on my newest content. So in today's video, I'll react to one of Jubilee's videos, Should Minors Transition, Detransition versus Trans, Middle Ground. So I really enjoy a lot of Jubilee's content. They often do videos on controversial issues. The whole point is have these two opposing sides find a middle ground. In fact, this has been something that I've been wanting to make a video about because I feel like in our day and age when we have Dylan Mulvaney dominating the internet, this is a much needed conversation. And I'm super against having kids transition. I don't understand that. I don't even understand how we can have a whole, debate about this, but I'm really interested to see this conversation. And I'm actually surprised that Jubilee actually, invited people who had detransitioned. Really curious to know their thoughts.
Step forward if you agree with the prompt. Gender-related treatment should be banned for minors.
Medical transition is no place for a child. I transition as an adult and I have medical complications. I have mental health issues. Child cannot consent to a medical transition because kids want to eat ice cream every day. It doesn't mean that they should.
I kind of agree with you on that as well because we have so many rules and regulations when it comes to tobacco or alcohol or any type of drugs. Driving a car, you can't even, rent a motel until you're like 25. There's some specific things that we need to put into place that I think would help protect our children because the minors themselves really don't know who they are until they become 25, 26 years old. Their minds aren't fully developed and...
Yeah, so this is very interesting, that we have all these rules and regulations. For instance, you can't legally start drinking until you're the age of 21, but, you can get on hormones before your brain is even developed. And the thing of it is, it's like you don't even know who you are at that point. You know what I mean? You think, you've just been watching a bunch of TikToks. That transitional age is such a sensitive age. Like you're so confused about your body, even if you're not struggling with gender dysphoria. I remember that age, being 13, 12, and being so uncomfortable in my body just because I was going through changes and my body was constantly changing. And it's a very kind of sensitive and delicate age, and if anything you need more guidance and people to tell you the truth. And so when you have TikTok, all these technological bombs trying to tell you, okay, you feel, oh, it must be gender dysphoria, when part of it is probably normal to feel kind of weird. Because I remember feeling super weird. Like I felt like, I'm just gonna say it, I felt like my boobs were too small. I felt like my face looks weird. I didn't find myself attractive at that age at all. I just felt like I was just a freaking dwarf. Like I just did not like myself, I had a very low self-esteem. I just didn't think I was pretty. Struggling, as a young kid and just trying to, and just needing so much guidance. This is where I'm so thankful for my parents who never pushed certain gender ideologies on me. Okay, oh, you're feeling this way, you must be in the wrong body or something. And I always was told, God created you, you're beautiful. Jesus is the answer to all your identity issues. And
so I did transition as a minor. I was a teenager who had a lot of mental health issues and had been sexually exploited and hated my body. And it ended with me kind of finding spaces where that was twisted into, no, you're just a boy in the wrong body. And it ended with me having my first ever medical intervention being a double mastectomy at 16 before any hormones, before anything else.
Oh my goodness, guys, can you imagine going through something like this and having a double mastectomy as your first medical intervention? Wow. I really feel very sad for this person, and I'm sorry that they went through this, but it just tells us that, like, myself being a nurse practitioner, and one of the things that I did for my training was I was with this pediatric nurse practitioner, and I remember a specific case of this little girl. She was like 13, green hair, she was a bit overweight. She was really overweight, but and she was just on her phone on the floor, and here's the mom's like, oh, she's telling me something that she needs to get on hormones and so on. And I remember my preceptor talking to the mom and, feeling like, I felt like she was not sure. She's like, well, we need to talk about this more. We really have to get to the root of this issue and trying to help the situation. But I just feel like the field of medicine has been overburdened by things that are not necessarily objectively medical. Medicine has this burden now of bearing not only your physical issues, but also your mental, your existential, and it's like a part where parents taught their kids, how to navigate these sensitive years, but now this burden, like this confusion, is overspilling into the medical community where we just don't know what to do. And when medical professionals don't know what to do, they just give generic prescriptions, so.
In the past 6 months, I have watched my body fall apart and waste away in front of me. I have constant joint pain. I've watched my muscle mass waste away. I've watched my vocal cords hurt. I don't know if I'll ever be able to carry a child. The evidence we have suggests that the best way to figure out if gender dysphoria persists into adulthood is to let them grow up.
Oh, amen. Just let them grow up. I mean, as a Christian, this is more of a spiritual issue of sin or our fallen nature. I believe that God created men and female, two genders, two biological sexes, and that's all there is to it. And everything in between is a deviation from the truth. And it's sin. It's sin, first and foremost, it's sin. But people don't want to look at this as sin. They want to say, well, this is just a dysphoria or this and that. It's a deviation from the norm. It's a deviation from God's original intent. As a humanity, we bear the consequences of the original fall, of the original sins when we departed, when we chose to disobey the Lord. And, our nature is fallen. Things are imperfect. Evil exists. Our bodies are not perfect. Our psyches are not perfect, right? So it's a struggle. And the only way that we can be in our true self and feel truly who we ought to be is when we are connected to our Creator in a personal relationship, when our identity, the sense of who we are, comes from Him, not from, Because here's the thing, we're creatures of far more than our biology and our cells and the things that make us physical. First and foremost, we are spiritual beings. People are like, okay, something's wrong with me, I don't feel right in this body, but here's the thing, if that's how you feel, you have to ask yourself, who created your body? Who has the instructions on your body, right? Who made this, and if you're not feeling this way, maybe this is something God's pointing you towards Him, that you are first and foremost made to be in relationship with Jesus, with our Creator, with the one who we are made into the image of. So, and when people don't have God, right, they look at all these other things to sort of fill the void, maybe what I need is to be a female. That will fix my issues. Well, it's not going to fix anything. No medical procedure, no chopping, no adding is going to fix that void. That void was designed for a Creator, for the one who made you, the one who made not only you, but everything in this world, who created the fabric of our reality. And until that comes into place, everything else will feel off.
I mean, if we're going to be honest, every major medical organization supports gender-affirming care for trans youth. They say it's safe and it's life-saving. And there are numerous studies that back that up.
The study that backs it up for puberty blockers is the Dutch protocol, and the same scientists—
I have 10 studies that I can bring to you right now.
The same scientists that brought that up have since rolled it back and said it was never supposed to be applied the way it has. The American medical industry, we all know, is money hungry and has gone off the rails.
Guys, I also think the root of everything is money, and all these medical associations and all these studies, they overblow because, anytime there's money to be made, we compromise our morality or things that are, I feel really bad for this individual,
I do agree that there are definitely some doctors out there that may be taking advantage of trans people, and I'm sorry that you went through this. Truly, I really am sorry.
I really feel bad for Luca, honestly, because this is somebody who's really just sharing their pain and how they thought that this was going to fix their issues, and it did not.
Right now, it saved your life. You may still die from it. You don't know. You're
die
still
happy.
Exactly.
You'll die for ideology, and a lot of people have died for an ideology.
It's not an ideology.
But we have more
is.
people that are dying because
It's an
they're not
idea that you were
allowed
born
to
in the wrong
express
body.
themselves. Look at the suicide rate of transmasculine folks. It is at 55%. And one of the factors that could save their lives is support. Right? And so if we have folks that are committing suicide because they're not allowed to transition, how do we fix that? If you're telling me the transition for children or minors is something that's that shouldn't be done?
The first here, I am very sensitive to this subject, as I have been the person who has had to talk people off the ledge when it comes to suicidality. The discussion around how we talk about suicide is a very dangerous one in this community. You know, my parents were told, do you want a dead daughter or a living son? That's not an appropriate way to talk about that.
And I understand that, but it is our transmasculine youth
I understand that
are at the highest risk
I
of
understand that,
suicide.
and they deserve help, but we also need to have a responsible conversation that is not using suicide as a means to push them down a pipeline before they have that comprehensive care.
Oh, guys, I don't know how many times I've heard this. It's like, you know, the fact that parents are forced, it's like, oh, if you don't transition, they're gonna kill themselves. Like, you know, it's such a manipulative tactic, because you're kind of pushing them towards this yes or no decision versus being like, well, let's navigate this whole process, you know, let's give it time, you know, let's see, you know, let's work together. It's like, oh, do you want a dead daughter or you want to transition them? You know, think about these issues as these things are not physical, but we live in a secular society that deals with every problem that is, you know, mental or psychological, with this issue of like, oh, we just need to add these pills, these hormones, we need to do this surgery, when these are things that are metaphysical. These are not medical, real, like objective medical issues. This is like a person is having maybe an existential crisis, an identity crisis. They don't know who they are. They don't know why they're on this planet. You know, they're having maybe a disconnect. They don't know why they were made, you know, and instead of going into these conversations about psychological implications, about philosophical implications, existential, talking about faith, about God, you know, people are like, well, here's the hormone pills, or, you know, there's surgery, you know, as if that's going to fix, you know, the issue. And here's the thing, you don't deal with metaphysical problems with physical solutions. You know, the only way you're going to, you know, deal with psychological, metaphysical, subjective issues is with spiritual conversations, with talking about God. That's how you deal with those kind of issues. But because we are secular in a society and we don't believe in God, we don't believe in a creator who designed our bodies and everything, you know, and we think that, well, God made a mistake, instead of understanding that we are sinful people and that we have this fallen nature, instead of understanding that and submitting to God, if I exist, God made, there's no God because I cannot be a mistake. Well, you can be a sinner. How about that? And we all are sinners, deviate from the truth, and the only way we get back into truth is when we submit to God. And instead of talking about these kind of conversations with these patients and with these people and their families, you know, we say, well, with the medical community, because it's how we trained, you know, as to be, you know, scientists and be objective for gender dysphoria issues with these physical solutions of like chopping or adding some pills and whatnot, because also that makes money, right? That generates income. So it's crazy to me, you know, where first and foremost, you know, yeah, and people, and they'll say, well, we do therapy, but at the end of the day, the way at least I'm a medical professional, so I practice, you know, we always talk about cognitive behavioral therapy. Do you think anybody really takes the time to do this cognitive behavioral therapy? Most of the time, you know, cognitive behavioral therapy fails, so we're going to give you these pills, right? That's kind of how it goes.
We insult children, our youth, so much by taking away their autonomy and their own agency over their own decisions, and insulting that they know who they are. Like, an adult knows who they are more than they do. No one knows who I am more than I do. Right. And it's always been that way. I've always known who I was. I've never.
This is so stupid, because it's like we insult our children by taking their autonomy and telling them who they are when they themselves knows best what they are. That is the most dumbest thing I've ever heard. Children need guidance. Children are children. They're not literal adults. Children need to be helped into adulthood. And, you know, we're not, you know, they need structure. Psychologists, child psychologists will tell you that children need boundaries. They need, you know, a sense of, if you leave children to be whatever they want, if you leave your kid and you don't raise your kid and you let your kid be whatever, you know, he or she wants to be, that's going to be a terrible thing for them. They're not going to know how to be an adult. They're not going to know how to be respectful, you know. So this argument is so stupid. It's so dumb. The responsible parent, you need to be disciplining your kid. You need to be helping your kids through all these, you know, issues of their sexuality, of all these things.
I've never felt like I was in the wrong body. I just had to adjust my body. And so I think taking away kids' agency and the right to their own body is, it's anti-human.
I have a question. Do you believe minors should be able to get tattoos or plastic surgery or consent to the list of other.
so different.
Hold on.
I
Let me
understand they
answer
are
this
different
question for
things,
you.
but to what
No, you
level
can't
do
even
we?
make that
To what level do we give children bodily autonomy over everything they do? Because here's the thing: children need barriers in childhood development. You need barriers, and they need a safe way to push against those barriers.
The dumbest argument I've ever seen. Any kind of health, whether that's mental, whether that's physical health, any kind of health is associated with boundaries. Everything. If you want to be a functioning member of society, you will need to have boundaries. And this is sad. This is really sad that, these kids, whatever they feel like is what's being validated versus the truth. Biology matters. God created you to be a girl. He used to have people like Mr. Rogers who would teach your kids, boy is born a boy and a girl. Now, the thing that is educating your children is freaking TikTok and Snapchat and all these weird stories that they present. And whenever your kid now hits that stage of like they're confused about their body, it's like, oh, it must be gender dysphoria. What? And then as a parent, you don't have any authority to kind of steer your kid because, oh, what they say matters. And we live in this crazy culture and society that's really, abusing kids and taking advantage of kids. And we have all these companies that do the same thing.
Doling out surgeries for children, that's not happening
I had a
anywhere.
letter from a therapist in a single visit at the gender clinic office
And
before
that
I
was
had
abuse
the first.
from that therapist who did not
that's
psychoanalyze
awful.
the rest
That
of
should
your
not
issue.
And it's interesting, and there's like, well, this is abuse from this psychotherapist who did not analyze. It's like, why? The amount of responsibility that these these people and these, parents are putting on these therapists it's unbelievably and unheard of. It's almost like we now think that the therapists know everything about your kid, about your situation, and they're supposed to. And if God forbid they're wrong, at the end of the day, as parents, you need to be the one who is helping your kid through this. But this
Your issues weren't being trans. There were a lot of other issues that you're
I have a
addressing right
diagnosis
now.
of gender dysphoria as
And
well.
you shouldn't. You were misdiagnosed.
No, I have one.
Yeah, you had to get a second opinion, honey.
Right.
And how was
Can
how was I supposed to do that when my parents were told
That's
that I
not
would
your
kill
fault.
myself?
But your
Yeah, that's not your
parents,
fault.
your parents,
Their biggest crime in all this was trusting in a medical system that they thought would help me, and the professionals apparently not doing the right thing here.
God intended for there to be only two genders.
Oh, I love this one. God intended for there to be only two genders.
Okay, you go first.
Okay, so as a Christian, I truly believe that God created male and female, and He created that throughout life, throughout the nature, throughout the wildlife, throughout Earth itself. And then the arguments come up into the ocean sides of, well, there's these asexual creatures and stuff like that. Well, they were designed that way for a reason, and we humans were not designed to. We were designed to procreate and be able to bring life back to the earth because we live and we die, we live and we die. It's a rotation of a process of life in itself, and it's its own journey. So I truly do believe that there is male and there is female, but I can respect people's choices. However, that's where I stand on it.
Well, I'm not Christian, but I do believe there's only two biological sexes, and somehow that's how it's been designed, whether it's by higher power or by evolution. I do believe gender expression has been on a spectrum for centuries. We do have references to people who've been cross-dressing. We have references to eunuchs. And as somebody who went through transition and detransition, when I started taking testosterone, it's almost like reminded me of my original blueprint. And I feel like I went against my original blueprint and I did a lot of damage to it, and I just cannot go back to who I was because without my testicles, I'm just too far gone in my transition. So that's where I'm at.
That's exactly what it is. That's the old-time truth, guys. Anytime you see all these attempts to confuse and over-embellish, the truth is always very simple. At the end of the day, what is true is so in front of our faces sometimes, but because we've been corrupted by sin and our disobedience and our desire to manage this life, that we did not create, human nature to rebel against God that is in us, we get ourselves into all these sad situations. But at the end of the day, the truth is very clear. In Genesis, God created them male and female in his image. He created them. And that is the truth. That is the foundational truth. And anything outside of that will always be a deception and a lie.
Yeah, we have historically spent more time focusing on and celebrating several genders. There are several different cultures throughout the world that celebrate the different genders, and to negate the fact that they exist and to negate their validity is just wrong.
There are as many intersex people as there are redheaded people on the planet. I can name 12 people at the top of my head who are born intersex. So to pretend like there's man and woman is just erasing an entire group of people. The God you speak of, the first God that intersex people get to meet is the doctor, because it's up to their discretion of just what you're gonna be when they mutilate their body to be a man or a woman, and that is not fair.
Right.
Right, and I think also gender and male and female is not the same thing.
Biological sex are different things.
Yeah, we're talking about gender, which is like gender identity, the social aspects to being a man or a woman. But male and female dictate sex, so like body parts.
I disagree with the having sex and gender being two different things.
Okay,
I
well,
believe
that's a
them to be
fact.
one. So I believe that there is, they're the same, they're one and the same. They're not different, but we have evolutionary problems within the humanity, because I also see that there are intersex animals that do exist, and that's how they're born. But I also do believe that the initial design was for man and woman, and then somewhere along the way, viruses, mutations, diseases, plagues, all that type of stuff that we have in the world does play a part back onto the world itself. But I believe the initial intent was for God to create Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. I'm just gonna say it.
That's homophobic.
I know it sounds homophobic, and I understand
No,
I'm
it
hitting.
is
It is homophobic.
Shout out to David for speaking the truth when, it's not popular his opinion. But he's exactly correct in that God's intent and God's design was for there to be a male and female, and that's how he created them in their image. But because the world is fallen, because of the disobedience and because of the original sin, we have fallen bodies. We're mortal, even though God did not create us to be mortal. Because of the fall, now we are mortal. Our bodies are imperfect. We have kids, have Down syndrome, for instance. So intersex people will be part of that fall, and they exist. There's no denying, but that's a very particular set of people and population. This is not what we're talking about with these people who, were born a female and there was nothing wrong with your, with your genitals, and you decided then to transition to the opposite sex, all these modifications and all this technology that we have, right? Like, that's a whole different issue. So by the original design, the original code, if you will, was for female and male.
And there are biological differences in trans folks. When we look at the brainstem, our brainstems are different. Like, that's
Neurologically.
Right, neurologically, we're different.
Yeah,
and
male
so
and female are different, exactly.
Trans people are different.
Yes.
They've found a distinct difference in the
white matter.
cortex.
There is no biomarker for trans. Some brain scan of some gay males is identical to female brain, but there is no biomarker for trans. Please don't spread misinformation.
I'm so glad that Shape basically called Lucky out, because there's a biological blueprint for a trans person. There is no such thing. That's misinformation. They didn't find any kind of genes or some biological marker. That's a bunch of nonsense.
There is science that hints towards it, it's just not confirmed.
No,
Well,
there's
confirmed,
research.
so-
So therefore,
Oh my gosh, science changes by the day.
which therefore I believe that God's initial intent was to create male
I
and
think
female.
if God intended to, if God exists and in the way that you believe and just intended to make male and female, then
And
we wouldn't be sitting here. I believe
Intersex people wouldn't
in
exist.
a higher power, right, of my own, and God is not this thing that creates.
Notice he says, this is what happens, when people don't want to submit to God's order, to God's design, when our sin, we want to not give the lordship to our God, we basically create our own idea of God, our own higher power, right? Like, we create our own version of the truth, versus submitting to the creator. For instance, let's say, I designed a particular, machine, my phone. Okay, let's just say I have my phone, right? Somebody designed this phone, okay? This is an iPhone. Steve Jobs, basically the creator. For this iPhone to function at its best, right? I need to be following the instructions that are on this phone. And if I choose to do whatever I want to this phone, you know, not follow the instructions, yeah, it'll work, but it's not gonna work to its maximum potential, to its maximum design. So it's the same thing, you know. And here's the thing, you know, who's wrong? You know, is the phone, you know, am I wrong or is the designer wrong? Right? Like, this is what becomes an issue. It's like, oh, whose fault is this? You know, that, you know, and now I'm having all these malfunctions. Is it because of Steve Jobs, or is it because me not wanting to follow the instructions? And this is what people do with God. It's like, oh, I'm having all these problems. Well, because you chose to walk a life that is apart from God. Greatest and foremost sin is our pride, our human pride, to think that we can handle life apart from our original creator and designer, aka God. There cannot be a God because I'm having all these problems and all these issues, so there must be no God. Or if I'm going to allow an idea of a God, I'm going to create my own God that will fit my sort of like delusional self, right? Like, that's what people do to this higher power argument. And when truth of the matter is, at the end of the day, there will always be a Steve Jobs who designed this iPhone, you know. There's always going to be a designer. Just because you choose to have your own set of rules of how to handle this iPhone does not take the fact that, you know, Steve Jobs created this phone. You know, Apple created this phone. There's a clear designer with clear instructions who knows this thing better than you do. If you choose to disobey the instructions or the manual for this phone and mistreat it, don't be out here then blaming and saying that, well, there cannot be a God because you yourself are choosing not to follow the instructions on this phone. Does that make sense, guys? Okay, I'm going through all this dysmorphia. Must be God made I cannot accept that God made a mistake, so, you know, I'm going to create my own version of God. God does not create mistakes. You know, if you're going through this, it's the problem of sin. You know, you need to go to God, and God can help you.
God is not this thing that creates rules and binary situations and laws that can be broken or really made. We're just all here.
Yeah.
You know, like I was.
Yes, God is the one who creates order. He is the God of order. He's not a God of chaos. He is a designer with intent. So yes, that's who God is. And you're wrong. You created your own version because you just want to be an independent human being. You don't want to submit to the laws of God. I can say all day I don't believe in gravity, but if I jump off the cliff, I'm going down and I'm going to die. I can believe all day that I don't believe in gravity. Does not take the fact that gravity does exist.
Yeah.
You know, like I was born in a female body, but I was never a girl. Never, ever, ever. I can't explain why, but that is my truth.
All right, guys, so I think that's all I want to react. I wanted to kind of hit the minor issue and then talk about God, and I think it was a good video, you know, and had a really good conversation from people on both sides of the party. But essentially, as a Christian, I believe that this is a problem of our disobedience to God, the fact that we don't want to submit ourselves to our Creator, and we think that we know best. And when we have problems arise, like gender dysphoria and all these things, you know, we don't know how to deal with these things because we're choosing not to submit to our God. Versus if we live a life that is conscious of our Creator and we become spiritual beings, then our bodies, our functions, then they have, you know, then we'll know the instructions, what the Word of God, the Bible, has to say about how we ought to conduct ourselves. And you know, yes, it's a battle, you know, sin, we battle the thing, but God is able to empower us through the Holy Spirit to win. All these people, what they're looking for is a community and acceptance and love and all of these things, you know, which is a religious, you know, instinct. And that's only found in God. That's only found in Jesus, who loved us so much, who died for us. That's what the gospel is about, is that, like, you're in search, you're broken. You don't know how to understand this reality, but here's a loving God, a personal God, not a God who's out there, higher power, or this vague thing. No, we believe in a loving Father who created all of us, and because of our disobedience, he's been on this whole quest to redeem us, to bring back what was lost, and to give us a new life in Jesus Christ. If we accept him as our Lord and Savior and we submit to his commandments, we're promised true freedom. You know, true freedom. Yeah, you know, the Bible has these boundaries and these laws, but simply for the fact so we can be flourishing, so we don't see these sad transition stories of these people who thought there was going to be hope in this medical procedure. There was going to be, they put all their hope into all these broken vessels, you know, that don't fulfill. And the only thing that can truly fulfill is our Lord Jesus Christ. And I love this part of the Bible when Jesus meets the Samaritan woman, and he's not even supposed to be talking to her, but you know, he says, you know, I can give you living water. You know, you've been in all these on-off relationships. Even the man that you're with, he's not your husband. You're just going through all of these things, trying to find happiness and acceptance and all these things, and you're really broken, but I can give you a living water. And Jesus literally transforms her life. He fixes this woman's brokenness, and she goes and evangelizes through the whole Samaria about what Jesus did for her. And this is the same issue. All these trans dysphoria people, at the end of the day, they're looking for acceptance, for belonging, and no amount of medical transitions and all this secular nonsense is going to truly deeply satisfy. Yeah, maybe for right now you're happy in your transition. You don't know who you're gonna be like in 5 years. You don't know what kind of hurdle you will be around when, you know, when you can't have maybe access to these hormones. You're not gonna have access to all these things. You know, who are you then? You know, so it's first and foremost, this issue of gender dysphoria is an identity issue, and it's first and foremost a spiritual issue. And as Christians, we should, you know, this is a wonderful opportunity to preach the gospel, to invite people to a conversation, to a sense of belonging that only Jesus can give. Like, even myself, like, the thing that identifies me is not the fact that I'm a woman first, or my race, or anything like that. The thing that first and foremost, you know, grounds my identity is the knowledge of the Lord, is the fear of the Lord. Not fear like scary, but reverence for God, you know, this love for God. And me knowing that I'm a daughter of a living God has come into my life, who has given me an identity. And before I am a woman, before I am a Black person, before I am all these other things, I'm first and foremost deeply loved by a loving Creator who has a great purpose for my life, despite the challenges, despite the things that, you know. And this is the message of the gospel that the trans community really needs. And that's the only answer, not just for the trans, but for humanity in general. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching this video and my little reaction. And please subscribe to my channel so you can stay up to date on all my videos. And I'll see you guys in the next video.